Welcome to the Carolina Panthers In My Mind podcast. I am your host, Luke Farber. And what is in my mind today? Well, last week was the Chargers, obviously. And I was down in Portland watching at my younger brother's new place. And I remember mentioning to him in the last 5 minutes of the game, come on, Bryce, come on, offense. Give me something to talk about on the pod this week. Well, as you know, we didn't score, but we obviously have plenty of things to talk about. First of all, we're not going to start with Bryce. We're not going to start with the bad. We're going to start with the good. We're going to reflect on the growth from week 1 to week 2, because as much as it felt like it on Sunday, this season is not over. And I'm sorry, but I'm not throwing in the towel and just assuming that we're going to end up in the bottom of the league again. I can't believe that. I do believe this roster is better than that. What's going to happen? I don't know, but we'll see. Anyway, the good from last week. Let's go defensively first. Obviously, we gave up over 200 yards rushing, so the run defense was not good. However, it did improve from week 1 to week 2 as far as I'm concerned. The defensive line did not get shoved around nearly as much. There were not nearly as many missed tackles. Sure, we gave up a long TD run to Dobbins. You can't do that. But I think that's the thing that is skewed with defensive stats, especially these days. Last year, we were third in the league in pass defense, I think, in yards allowed. But of course, we were the worst team in the league. So how does that compute? Well, it computes because we were always behind because, well, the offense couldn't score, typically would turn the ball over. And there's only so much a decent defense can do with that, especially if they're worn down by the end of the first half. It's just going to look ugly on the scoreboard at the end. So, yeah, we didn't give up very many pass yards on Sunday, but we sure as hell gave up the rush yards. And at 5 yards a carry, that's too much. So there was improvement, not nearly enough, obviously, but improvement, and without Derek Brown. And I expect the defense to continue to improve, the tackling to continue to improve, and the communication in the secondary to continue to improve, which was better this last week. We also forced 3 turnovers. I know the box score only says 2, but the officiating call on that catch fumble on the first drive of the game was horrific. It was a catch and a fumble. And because the next play was a touchdown pass, the officials put us behind out of the gate. And as far as I'm concerned, I listened to my Move the Sticks podcast recap of our game, and DJ, who's actually the Chargers announcer, it makes some stupid comment about the Panthers being 4 players away from being 6 players away from being a decent team. Give me a break. I'm sorry, but that was a defense that, after getting run over by the Saints on the road in the first game, came back in the second game and held your beloved Chargers and Justin Herbert to, without that bogus touchdown, 20 points. And 20 points, given that their offense only held the ball for 23 minutes and only scored 3 points. And their quarterback had under 100 yards passing. So for a defense to do that, that means they made some plays. And it also probably means they've got some players. So give me a break, DJ. Come on. Anyway, obviously, it's not a perfect performance. Run defense has to get better. Pass defense was much better. Turnovers caused much better. We'll see how it goes this week. We're on the road again. We're in a dome again. We're going up against Gardner Minshew, so it's definitely probably the lowest quality quarterback we have gone up against so far. So we'll see what kind of effort and execution the defense gets in Vegas. Anyway, moving on to the offense, what was good that we saw? Well, we saw the running game come alive. I think I wanted 25 carries for Hubbard. He got 10. He averaged 6.4 a carry. So they were opening up holes. And Chuba is not Christian McCaffrey. He's not Saquon Barkley, but he is an effective one-cut runner with power and speed. And they opened up plenty of holes for him on Sunday, which is a great sign because we need the running game if the passing game is going to do anything. And if we can hold the ball for longer than 23 minutes, which was our time of possession in the first two games. So it was great to see the offensive line opening up some holes. It was great to see Chuba hitting them. We didn't run the ball enough, in my opinion. Keep pounding the rock, especially if your quarterback is having difficulty even completing screen passes. But that's the problem. If we can't get anything out of the passing game, which was pretty much the case on Sunday, the running game only has so much effect it can take. Also, everybody's complaining, oh, you're not throwing the ball down the field. You're not throwing it. Well, if the offense can't get into a rhythm, then how are we supposed to elongate those drops? How are we supposed to make effective play action? How are the DBs supposed to respect any routes or the routes that may come off of those if we can't complete the simple comeback to make the stop and go effective? There's a lot of things and why the passing game hasn't materialized to this point. And, I know some, I'm not an expert, and I'm not going to say that I'm in the headset hearing the play calls and knowing exactly what's going on. So there's obviously a lot to fix. And given the fact that the run game did get traction, and given the fact that we were at home against a team with a first-year head coach, even though I know everybody thinks Jim Harbaugh is football Jesus, and lots of turnover, defensive injuries, there should have been some room to move the ball. There wasn't. And whose fault is that? Everybody deserves fault. Bryce is out front. He's in the media. He gets benched. Everybody, it's funny how everybody before was kind of blaming him, and now everybody since he's been benched is blaming the franchise for their mishandling of him and the roster and whatnot. And I'm personally not going to give anybody, skirting responsibility. Everybody, we live in a community, we work together, we all share certain responsibilities when things don't go well. That being said, I read something this morning that was actually kind of the first poignant thing I've heard anybody say when it comes to the benching of Bryce Young, and it was Steve Young. And, his message to Bryce, his imploring to Bryce is ignore the outside noise, even if it's inside the building, because the report was Bryce was pissed when this happened. And, with everybody blaming the franchise and their lack of support of Bryce, who knows, maybe it'd be really easy for Bryce to blame everybody else in the building. And maybe that's the initial reaction. And, there's nothing wrong with initial reactions. But I think Bryce is smart enough. And what I know about him and his father being a psychologist and this whole mental health thing, if anybody is equipped and prepared to handle this, hopefully it's him. Does he have a future in Carolina? That remains to be seen. However, the thing that Steve really said about Bryce that, tied it together for me is, hey, worry about you. Look in the mirror, take care of everything you can in your power. Don't blame anybody else, and things are going to work out. And that's the type of thing I believe in life, because I think in this day and age, everybody is so quick to try to point the finger at somebody else. When something goes wrong, let's figure out who is to blame besides me, because it can't be me. Let's find out what specific person or what group in society or who can I blame for my situation. You know, uh, like I said before, we live in a community and we all share responsibility when things don't go well. However, the only person we can control is us. And that is the best way, in my opinion, to move forward amicably. So, you know, if I was given a message to Bryce, it'd be the same thing. Hey, man, work on you. You do you. You take care of everything you can to make this right. And it will be, especially because, a lot is talked about quarterbacks, especially ones that possibly face some adversity and ones that don't, and the growth that it may afford them in being a more complete person, more complete quarterback, and being more resilient. Because obvious Bryce has faced a lot of troubles in his first 18 starts in the league. So I think sometimes when a guy like that who's probably never been benched in his life before, probably never even come close to it before. Now, he's obviously received hard coaching because he played for Nick Saban, but he probably wasn't that close to ever losing his job. And I found the remarks that he said he was surprised to be interesting. Not surprised as a competitor, I get that, and maybe they hadn't given him any indication that his job was on the line. But honestly, if you perform like that, you should know that your job is on the line. And if you don't know that your job is on the line, maybe you should be told. And maybe you need to be told strongly, as in a benching. We'll see. I don't know. I like Bryce. I think Bryce has enough talent, enough moxie, enough everything to succeed in this league, but he obviously was not succeeding. Whose fault is that? It's a little bit of everybody's. Whose job is it to fix? It's a little bit of everybody's. But I think it starts with Bryce. It has to. So, anyway, buddy, I'm rooting for you. Uh, be a great scout QB until you get back on the field. I don't think it's going to take too long. However, moving on to week 3 preview, we got a new starting quarterback, and I guess we'll start there. Andy Dalton, 14-year vet, came in actually in the same draft with Cam Newton. The Red Rocket or the Red Rifle, depending on, your nickname per se. Anyway, what do I expect from Dalton? He's a veteran, so hopefully he should just have a little bit more understanding of what's coming as far as pressures and protections and checking in and out of plays and just being ready to release the ball in a hot route, which it seemed like Bryce was just slow on, honestly. So I expect more than 1 third down conversion per game, which was the allotment in the first 2. I expect the passing game to work more functionally. I expect it to work more functionally off the play action with the running game that we found last week. Now we are going against a really, really tough defensive line in Vegas, and that is going to be the matchup of the day. Our offensive line versus their defensive line. Everybody wants to talk about the quarterback, wants to talk about Bryce and Andy. We need our offensive line to set the tone. We need Chuba to run the ball 25 times. How about that? Let's give that 25 times. Let's see if he can hit up that 6.4 a carry. Anyway, yes, I expect to see much better offense this year or this week out of Dalton, just because, let's be honest, the last 2 weeks were historically bad. So we'll see what happens today. I expect better. It's not going to be easy. No game in the NFL is. And honestly, that's so much of this team and this season is I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen. There's been so much new, and the coach and the players and the front office and trying to get Bryce going. And obviously, we've laid a couple eggs to start the year. I expect a lot of fight out of this team. That is something that is never in short order in Carolina. We are not going to quit. We are going to keep pounding. And I think we have a decent showing in Vegas. Do we win the game? I don't know. It's another one of those toss up thing, but yes, I think that will tell the tale of the game is their defensive line versus our offensive line. If they're able to stop the run and Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins and company can get to Dalton, it's going to be a long day for our offense. I don't expect a ton out of their offense. I mean, they have Devontae Adams and Brock Bowers. Those are two really good receiving options, not to mention their second tight end, Mayer, which will allow them to be in 12 personnel and run effective play action to the tight ends. So Shaq and Josie and the safeties are really going to have to be on their game in the middle of the field. And obviously, the run defense has to be better. Let's look for more improvement with that this week. Hopefully, lower yards per carry, lower total yards, and if the team is functioning right, if the offense is doing its job and scoring points, and the defense is doing its job and limiting scoring opportunities, and hopefully causing turnovers, it's probably going to be a low scoring game, I would assume. But I have been wrong about my predictions so far this year. Well, I was right last week with the Chargers winning and almost right with their final score of 20. But anyway, two first-year head coaches. Let's see what happens in Vegas. I'm going to go ahead and predict a Panthers win, actually. I think we're inspired. I think the offense does enough. I think the defense makes some key plays. And I'm also not a believer in Minshew magic. I may be very wrong. They just went on the road and beat the Ravens. So hopefully coming back home, they're a little tired, they're a little self-confident, and we can catch them napping. So I'm going to go ahead and go 17-13, Panthers win. Finally, we get a victory Monday. And hopefully something to build off of, because I understand why they benched Bryce. I don't know if I would have done it, but after last year, after the last 6 years, and after those two whoopings to start the year, it's hard not to have your heart sink and feel like the season's over and whatnot. Like, but obviously we want to win the division. We want to make the playoffs. We want to win the Super Bowl, but we want to be competitive. We want the season not to be over by the time we get to November. I don't want to have to be wondering about where our draft position is in the third week of the season. In that vein, Let's head out to Vegas. Let's whoop some, keep pounding. Enjoy the game.